This was a bit of news today that actually, if you are a regular listener of this radio show, you will have kind of gotten tipped off to this a little bit. So apparently, if you remember the last time Neal Schon was on this show, which was not that long ago, but it was for the new Journey album, we were talking and I asked him about when the last time he spoke to Steve Perry was and what, if anything, the relationship was like now. And Neal, who's very open and honest and active on social media and is not a filtered guy at all, even in interviews, he said that, so 2 interviews ago, Neal Schon said that he was surprised that nobody had trademarked certain aspects of the Journey catalog or names or likenesses or what have you. That remarkably, a band that's had like a 50-year career, if someone was asleep at the wheel, I don't know what it was, but they never trademarked certain aspects of the song titles because, you want to trademark certain things because obviously you can put them on your merch and all of that. You don't want somebody else to get that trademark because then you're trying to actually buy back something you created. And most bands and business entities have people that oversee that sort of stuff for them and make sure that trademarks and copyrights are done properly, lawyers or what have you. So 2 interviews ago when Neal was on this show, he had said that he was surprised to find some key stuff in the Journey catalog had not been properly trademarked. So he took it upon himself to trademark these things, whether they're, say, like the song title, Don't Stop Believin', whatever you can trademark, you want to control that if there's a chance to monetize it. So Neal was saying that he went ahead and did all of that, and he couldn't believe it had not been done before because Neal Schon is actually managing Journey himself now. So that was an interesting revelation that he said on this show to me. And then I talked to Neal more recently, and the last time we spoke to him and had him on, and by the way, all these interviews are on the SiriusXM app. If you missed them, go there, search them, and there's an interesting perspective on this. Because when Neal was on last, maybe a month, 6 weeks ago, it was when the new album came out. I asked him, when was the last time you spoke to Steve? And he said, well, we actually had a call recently. I said, did you talk about music? And he said, no, we actually talked business. And I said, oh, really? And I don't want to get too personal on people's business, but I was like, everything cool? And he's like, well, yeah. He goes, we were talking about these trademarks and that I had trademarked these song titles or the name Journey or whatever it is for merch, etc. And he couldn't believe they weren't trademarked either. And Neal, in the interview, made it sound like, and I don't know if this is true or not, but that he did this in the interest of all the guys in the band that are partners in the Journey Corporation. And that my impression in talking to him was that this would have been a plus to Steve Perry because whatever Steve's cut is on the old Journey stuff, it would be money going to him. Well, yesterday or today, whenever it was, Steve Perry is now suing Neal Schon and Johnathon Cain, who are the 2 controlling principals of Journey, for these trademarks. And according to the documents that were filed in Steve's case, there's about 20, my understanding is it looks like song titles or something that were trademarked in this trademark move that Neal did, that he admitted to doing, that was done without the consent, cooperation, or I'm assuming proper financial considerations to Steve Perry, who has some control over this or says he does. So this is all legalese type stuff, which honestly, I know none of us are lawyers. None of us are fully involved in how or understanding of how all of it works. But as I tell you guys all the time, this whole thing that we love is called the music business. And often that second word is bigger than the first. Right, whether you want to admit it or not, it is. And business with a capital B. And there's so much that goes on behind the scenes: copyright, publishing, trademarks, name ownership. We've talked about it so often. And a lot of times these things don't get on the public radar. So that's why I think the public so often is kind of oblivious to what really goes on behind the scenes and how involved the business of music is. But certain times, certain bands are actually very transparent about it. And if somebody files a lawsuit, I think that becomes public record, so it comes out anyway. But Neal Schon has been very, very open about everything he's done with Journey, whether it's making the records, whether it's been past lawsuits, fights, whatever. It's really refreshing transparency, where everybody is so friggin' guarded and has a million walls up. Sometimes you just tell honestly what's going on. It's like, why not? So in this case, we are seeing this all now start to play out publicly, and I think it probably did, because when Steve Perry filed his lawsuit, it became a public record thing. And today, Neal Schon, through social media, has responded to the lawsuit, and needless to say, has a different approach about it or response to it, basically saying something to the effect of, and I'm paraphrasing, but, look, nobody did this. Everyone was basically asleep at the wheel. And I took it upon myself to do this at my expense with my attorneys, and everybody's coming around looking for their piece of the pie or saying it wasn't done right, when nobody did it at all until he started overseeing things. He also credits his wife, who is... who, if you follow Neal on social media, they're very connected. Obviously, they're husband and wife, but you know what I mean? She's a big part of some of the things that he does, and very prominent with him on social media. And he brought her up in this response, saying that she was the one who actually found the trademarks were not followed through and found the right attorney to go ahead and do this. So we talk about bands having certain levels of dysfunction, and I'd say more than half of the bands you know and love have significant levels of inner dynamic dysfunction. That's a hell of a word there, but it's honestly, I couldn't even begin to tell you how many stories I hear every day about how many all these guys in bands that go up there and smile and play these songs do not like each other. They don't go on the same bus. They don't have the same dressing room. They will not talk to each other. They go up, they smile, they play their hits, they get their money, they leave, and they go their separate ways. I know bands that the members will not even stay in the same hotel as other members of the band on the road, not in the same building. So, and there's so many stories, and some have come publicly. But when you think about Journey, you can actually make the case that there's been a lot of drama with them. Because remember, Ross Valerie and Steve Smith made a power move where they went after Cain and Schon for control of the name or something like that. This was like a year ago, 2 years ago. And they lost that, which resulted in those guys then being booted out of the band, which they are now. Now Steve Perry's making a move, and what's interesting about this in a music sense is, for you, the fan, and why this is important, is because for all those people that held out hope that maybe one day Steve Perry would get up and play and sing with Journey again, or maybe even do an appearance or a show, because it seemed like things had started to thaw a little bit between these camps. And I think when Neal said on this show and in a few other interviews that him and Steve had been talking lately, I think to the fans, we all kind of said, wow, well, that's an olive branch. That's a start. Maybe we are finally going to see something happen with these guys in a positive way. Well, we know now that that was kind of probably exploratory on Steve's part, and he has reached the conclusion that the deal is not to his liking, and he is now suing those guys. So if you thought that was getting closer, it is now way, way further apart, and there are legal things going on, as has been revealed publicly now. So another Journey lawsuit drama that is unfolding, and it's now with a guy that people constantly ask and wonder about, Steve Perry, who, by the way, has still not sung live and done a live performance since releasing his solo album like 5 years ago. He was in the studio with me on this show for that. Joel, would something that old still be up on the app?
Oh, yeah.
So an interview
I'm actually
from
going to go. I'm going to go look right now and make sure it's still there. But yeah, it should be.
If you find it, and you can find this, I'm going to have a couple best ofs coming up. We should maybe rerun that. It'd be great to rerun the Steve Perry, even though it had nothing to do with this. It was just his first real interview in years. The Steve Perry in studio, and then in the other hour, you could put the latest Neal Schon interview. You can have your Journey reunion on the radio. But yeah, I mean, so according to Joel, all my interviews from the last 6 years or so
I
are
got
up
it.
there.
August 15th, 2018, 43 minutes. Just go to the volume interviews bucket and search Steve Perry.
There you go, 4 years ago. So I was not that far off. 4 years ago, Steve Perry in the studio on this very show. And again, it was just, people loved that interview. I remember going into that interview, people were like, because Steve did not talk. I mean, Steve was like breaking a silence. And I remember there was so much like drama, not drama, but hey, well, maybe you can't ask about this or whatever. Steve came in, he was great. It's like, yeah, what do you want to talk about? Whatever. And I remember during that interview, Neal Schon texted me because he was listening, because he had not talked to Steve, and he was like, hey, tell Steve I said hello, pass along my number. So it's just a really interesting dynamic here that continues with Journey, and who knows where this all ends up. All right, so that'll be something to bear watching as we go forward.